If you had an hour to sit across from him, what would you say to him?
I would just listen. I wouldn't say much. I would just ask questions. If you can imagine, if you can imagine someone that for the first 28 years of their life was worked like a farm animal. Um, the man clearly was making his way forward in the world. He probably wasn't like really prosperous, but he was doing okay. But then you appreciate that he lived to be 108. Can you imagine all of the change that he saw? He saw every world war. He saw the advent of the automobile. No telling what else he saw that was remarkable to him. I would just like to sit and learn from him and appreciate how the world around him over the decades and the century impacted the way that he cooked and his bearing on life.
Listen, learn, get inspired. I'm Tavis Bryant, and this is BBQ Therapy. Like, subscribe, and follow to help grow the barbecue therapy community. Also, visit my website at www.bbqtherapypodcast.com.
Bring on down, barbecue, your barbecue on. Get your barbecue on. Get your barbecue on.
Welcome to the BBQ Therapy Podcast. My name is Tavis Bryant. Some stories start about food, some stories are about business, and some stories are about what survives. Today's guest represents all three. His family carries a barbecue legacy that reaches back more than 160 years to a man born into slavery who turned skill into survival, survival into excellence, and excellence into something his family still protects today. That legacy now lives through Old Arthur's barbecue sauce. But legacy sounds glamorous when you say it fast. The real question is, what does it feel like to carry it every day? I'm joined by Eudell Watts IV. Welcome to the show. I got one rule: make yourself at home and speak freely.
Davis, thank you for the introduction. Very generous, I would add. Glad to be here.
All right. Thank you for that. And I'm going to take it back. Let's get in the time machine and go way back. Could you explain to everybody who was Arthur Watts, the man that lived to the age of 108?
Tavis, I feel immensely blessed to be really the caretaker of right now of Arthur's legacy. Arthur was my great grandfather, born in 1837 in Randolph County, just outside of Kansas City. Arthur was born into slavery on a small farm that produced a number of commodities. Among them, they produced meat for sale in the Kansas City area. It was Arthur's job to produce that meat over open pit from about the age of 14 on. He did day in and day out, day in and day out, 7 days a week. There are no holidays for a slave. So you fast forward, he found himself freed at the end of the Civil War. He was 28 years of age. He left Kansas City with the only thing of value that he had, which were his skills and his recipes. He left on foot. He eventually wound up over in central Illinois, just about 125, 130 miles west of the Chicagoland area in a farming community called Kewanee. And because he was accustomed to cooking on such a massive scale, he was able to quickly begin to leverage his skill and his recipes to earn his way forward in the world, cooking for city events, county fairs, and other major civic gatherings. And he quickly carved out a name for himself as being the go-to pitmaster, really for almost a 100-mile radius around the Kewanee area. If you were having a significant event, you would wire for him. He would come to town and he would make it happen for you. And he enjoyed that reputation until the time of his accidental death at 108. You can check our website out and you'll actually see the oldest picture we have on there is he's 105. And you'll see that he's standing up straight. He's looking in the eye and you'll appreciate that he was fully capable that year. And then the following year at 106, of walking behind a plow horse as he did plowing his own farmland.
Wow. That was amazing. And what stories were passed down about his personality or what type of person he was?
We still there are 7 people in the family, my father included, who recall sitting on Arthur's lap, hearing his stories. Arthur died in 1945. And so, my father, all of his siblings, and all of his first cousins will tell you that, Arthur was generally had a very powerful presence, although he was a relatively quiet and reserved individual. But he didn't mince words, and he didn't like, in their words, he didn't like to repeat himself. So he was, he could be stern, he could be gruff, but at the same time, he was our family patriarch, in which literally generations to come, myself included, were passed down an incredible work ethic and a very strong sense of purpose in the things that you put your name on, the things you say you're going to do, get it done.
Exactly. And what a lot of people don't understand, but I know people sometimes are uncomfortable talking about race, but he was born into slavery, and this was 1837. People don't realize, and this is around the time with Abraham Lincoln, and that was a long time ago. And he was freed from when they had the Civil War. And the thing is, with African American people, it's amazing and it's awesome that you're able to trace back that far, because as far as us and being in slavery, there was no records, no birth certificates, and all that ancestry.com stuff. We can only go back a certain amount of time because there wasn't keeping no records on slaves and stuff like that. So I think it's amazing that y'all are able to go back that 6 generations and have pictures and stuff along the way and have history and know who he was and what type of person that was. I think that's so amazing.
It's interesting. A lot of forensic work, a lot of sleuthing. When you go back to his era and beyond, believe it or not, you actually can find records beyond Arthur to generations of our family before him.
Oh, wow.
I know that his mother's name was Sylvie. How do I know that? Because if you like a simple tool like ancestry.com, newspapers.com, you can find mention of them as property for other like landowners in that area. A landowner in the Randolph County area, if they did have slaves, typically there were documents that outlined that, like, how many and what their names were, how their relation to one another. And so we a lot of forensic research on our family's part to dig into it. Mm-hmm. But between myself, actually, my son, who was the 6th generation, all the way back to Arthur, it's an unbroken line of family members. So it's certainly a very interesting, very complex story.
And in the environment of slavery, he developed mastery. What did that teach you about resilience? Because back then, I mean, he's a slave and he didn't have to master anything. He just was required to cook. But he mastered it and figured out something that worked and something that tasted real good, which most people would be amazed, because being a slave, you're just trying to get the work done and get on somewhere.
My father remembers asking him as a child. So my dad was just shy of 6, and Arthur was a celebrity figure in that area. But my father was just shy of 6 when Arthur passed. But he remembers him talking about the fact that when he first got started, he was simply assigned the task. He was given no instruction. He didn't really have anyone taking him under the wing and mentoring him and giving him tips. His very survival was at stake in doing that job and doing it right. And it simply consisted of cooking meat. It had nothing to do with creating seasonings. It had nothing to do with creating sauces. It was just smoke this meat, get it right. Don't burn it. And once he got proficient at doing that, he got bored with the output. He knew that it could be better. So he took it upon himself to begin tinkering with seasoning combinations. Anything he could get his hands on, he would experiment with the stuff that he was cooking in order to enhance its flavor, to make it taste better. It started with seasoning blends, then it morphed into sauces. And eventually enough folks got a taste of what he was tinkering with that's kind of how they wanted it. And certainly as a free man, he never stopped his tinkering with his flavors, continuing to refine them, to tweak them, and to explore. He was naturally curious about what was possible in his cooking, and he just never stopped exploring that, investigating that.
Okay. Yeah, it's amazing back at that time as far as coming up with different seasoning combinations and not knowing anything about it, as well as sauce at that time, not knowing anything about it, because I don't think slaves were just getting barbecue sauce and seasonings and stuff like that. They were getting the scraps and all that. So it's amazing that.
Well, interestingly, the meat that they were cooking for sale, traditionally at that time, the dominant condiment being used was mustard in the German tradition, and the German and European tradition. And I found a newspaper article, I think it was from like 1919, in which he was doing a big city festival, and he's quoted in that newspaper article, when they were talking about what he was preparing and how he was going to prepare it. Someone asked, what they were going to serve it with, and they commented mustard. His response back, and it was in the paper, you don't need mustard at a barbecue. I got a feeling that's a sentiment that he had from the very beginning, and probably had something to do with him experimenting with new flavors.
Yeah, and definitely somebody took it and ran with it because they're using it as a binder now.
True.
All right, and let's take it from there. So when he cooked for large crowds, did he have a restaurant, or he just cooked in the backyard of his house, or?
He was a pitmaster for hire, and he would stipulate, I will come to town and execute this barbecue for you if you provide the manpower to build a proper pit. So a proper pit for him was 40 feet long, 40 feet long, 6 feet wide, and 4 feet deep. But his craftsmanship shown in the design of his pits, but then also the way that he staffed it. So once he,
that's the one on the website.
Yeah, it's on the website.
Everybody.
Yeah, it's on our website, but 40 feet long, 6 feet wide, 4 feet deep, and then along each edge of it, they'd stack two layers of cinder block. Then they put metal pipes at about 4-foot intervals. Then they would roll cattle wire down it. So then on top of the cattle wire, they would place, the pork shoulders or whatever large cuts of meat were going to be roasted. They would then, they would have had oak timber in the bottom, down in the pit, and they would light that timber typically at about like 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock in the afternoon and the evening, so that by about 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, it would be down to like red embers. And at that point, they top it with the meat, seasoned meat, and then they would station men at 6-foot intervals with long, brand new pitchforks, and those men would turn the meat, through the night, so that by about 10 o'clock the next morning, those shoulders or whatever it was would be ready to take off and be sliced into sandwiches.
Wow.
And so you'll see those photos on our website, oldarthurs.com. And there's a series of 3 photos. It's the pit itself as it's being dug. Then the second photo is being topped with, the piping and cattle wire. And then the final one is it loaded up with hundreds, and I do mean hundreds, of pork shoulders. And then men, including his oldest son, is the one in the butcher's hat that's closest to you in the photo, but men turning those pork shoulders through the night.
Yeah, that's amazing. And so I guess let's push past his era. Did his son pass everything on to him, and then he took over doing the large cookouts, or how did that go about?
His sons were his right hand in all the cooks that he did. I should say, in most of his years, his sons were his right hand. And so it naturally, kind of transitioned to him, or to them rather, went after his passing. So, the Hog Festival that they had annually in the Kewanee area, Kewanee known as the hog capital of America during World War I and World War II era. His oldest son, Eudell, my namesake, was the pitmaster for that from its inception all the way through, I believe it was like 1957 when they stopped doing pork shoulder and transitioned to butterfly pork chops. And, when they did that, that's more grilling. So that's when we bowed out.
Okay. And when you came along, when did you first hear the story? What age did you hear?
You kind of heard parts of it your whole life, but you didn't appreciate his life story. You didn't appreciate his legacy. I was literally out of college before I really understood this man's life work and what it meant. And but I can tell you that from the earliest of ages, as a child, when we would have like the 4th of July, Labor Day, Memorial Day, when we'd have family gatherings, there was always this excitement in the air because either my grandfather or my dad, one of the two of them was going to make Arthur's sauce, and they were going to use one of Arthur's rubs for the chicken, one of his other rubs for the beef or the pork. But there was always this buzz, particularly with the older folks in the family, because Arthur's flavors were coming into play. The rest of the year, we were going to the grocery store and buying, we were doctoring open pit like everybody else, honestly. But the reason it was reserved for special occasions, the recipes were so complex that you would literally need to start a week in advance making recipes of things that are going into the final recipe, smoking your salts, just doing things the average person isn't going to do to make barbecue sauce or to make rub or to, create a flavor.
So before you came into this, were you doing barbecue also, or were you doing something else and then change direction at a certain point due to something?
So let me answer that question. I'll start somewhere else. So Arthur and his son, Eudell Sr., made a significant portion of their earnings through open pit barbecue. Open pit barbecue, they worked for the city. Then they also farmed. My grandfather was fortunate enough to go to college. He came out of school. I mean, he was adept at barbecuing, but he came out of school and he started a business that had nothing to do with food whatsoever, that consumed the entirety of his adult life. So he left that behind, and he knew enough and shared enough so that my dad enjoyed it as a hobby. But my father owned a business that had nothing to do with food either. So he didn't have a lot of free time, but special occasions, he was making Arthur's stuff. When my father retired and sold his business, he and I kind of decided this might be the time to begin to try to share Arthur's legacy, because by now I had an appreciation of how significant his story was historically, and his barbecue was just damn good. And my dad enjoyed sharing it. So that's when we decided about 14 years ago, we decided to bottle it and have a go at it. And it's supported itself like from the very beginning. It's not my day job. It's my father's beginning now to transition. He's 85, so he's not doing a lot of the promotional. Makes a lot of appearances and helps us with a lot of cooks and things, but he's not out making sales calls and that type of stuff, very often. Right now, I'm trying to build a business that I transition to the next generation of our family, my son, nephews, nieces, people that want to be involved in it.
Yeah, definitely. And having that type of legacy, I guess it comes with a lot of pressure, and a lot of people don't see the behind the scenes. What has that cost you personally as far as just the weight of that legacy that came before you?
Well, I don't feel weight. Yes, there is a internal expectation of living up to Arthur's standards. He didn't cut corners in the things that he did. He had an exceptional work ethic. He taught his son And that got passed down father to son, that the most important thing that you have is your word. If you give your word, your name is on that. You got to stand behind it. And so that's the life that I've lived. That's how I've done my best to teach that same lesson to my children. So that for me, that's the most important part of Arthur's legacy. It isn't so much the, protecting his recipes, his sauces and dry rubs and everything else. It's those things are the easy part. The hard part is living in a way that would make him proud, because he certainly lived in a way that makes me proud.
So did he write the recipes down, or did y'all pass it from memory?
That's a great question. No, he wasn't literate. He couldn't read. He couldn't write. We had his recipes in more of an oral tradition originally, and then we discovered that he actually did write them down it's in the penmanship of his children's handwriting. So where we had taught, generation after generation after generation, had orally passed the recipes down. My father, who has always enjoyed cooking, was the recipient of a few different elder family members' recipe boxes that had been consolidated upon a couple of other folks' deaths. And by going through them, meticulously, like 15 years ago, we discovered that we actually had a really nice collection of Arthur's original recipes, and they're by virtue of his children's handwriting.
Man, that's awesome. And
yeah, we're fortunate in that respect.
So when y'all make it and made it, bottled it, did y'all go to a co-packer or did you do it yourself? Because how hard was that to translate it from what y'all usually make to get somebody else to make it and it tastes exactly the same?
Well, first we had to get it so that it met the standard. So I told you we got like 7 or 8 folks that are still alive from when Arthur was cooking on this earth. It had to meet their test, their standard first. Yes, this is what it tastes like, or nah, there's too much garlic, too much vinegar, too much whatever. And so the recipes were difficult to translate because they don't use traditional measures like teaspoon, tablespoon. It's a pinch, a palm, a handful. Like, that's all relative to the size of your hand, And so I will tell you, just in getting his barbecue sauce right, to a point where, the crew, my dad's siblings and his first cousins, were to a point where they could all agree that that tastes like Arthur's. That's what I remember. I would say that we probably cooked 45 pots of barbecue sauce, cooked and bottled in mason jars to get to everybody, having them vote and fill out little questionnaires, and they were patient, but we got it done.
Yeah.
And I can tell you that the end result was a barbecue sauce. We sent it into in BBQA after we were selling it for a few years, but we finally got wind of this contest that the National Barbecue and Grilling Association was having. So we sent our barbecue sauce in, and lo and behold, we won first place as the best tasting tomato-based barbecue sauce in America. That was 2022. Sent our spicy in the next year for the spicy tomato-based barbecue sauce. And it too won first place out of, 7,500 entries.
Yeah, definitely. And that's a good convention for those that, don't know about it, that get your product out there, or whatever type of business you're in, they have a category for it. And I got the pleasure to go this year to it, and I had a great time. I have a podcast, but it gave me an opportunity to go out there and meet people and listen to certain parts of it that were for me and stuff like that. And it got me a chance to get out there and mingle and meet people. So it's definitely a great environment for those that can go, and as well as submit your hard work to see how it measure up against other people. Because there's a lot of top barbecue sauces out there, and to come out on first, that means a lot. And killing them, they carry a lot of weight at barbecue. They've been doing it for a while, and they professional with it. It's blind judging, so it's not like, okay, I know who this sauce this is and this sauce is. It's blind judging. So if you win, you won. So
Yeah.
Go ahead.
One of the neat things about that particular event is the number of just regular people that are there also. So you've got industry folks, you have manufacturers like me, you have media personalities like yourself, you have a whole host of professionals, folks that you see on television barbecuing, and then you've got a nice number of folks that are just backyard enthusiasts that are there for all the educational content, and everyone is welcome to the event, to be perfectly honest. And the neat thing about it is you go down for breakfast and you're sitting at a round table, and you got at the same table, you got, the guy that came in from California just because he's a barbecue nut, like he and his son. You might have a couple of barbecue restaurant owners at the table. You got the guy that makes the vacuum sealing machine that everybody uses. Then you got a television personality at the table. So it makes for interesting breakfast conversation.
Yeah, and definitely. And they make you feel comfortable because, let's be real, it's probably like 4 or 5 black people and the other different races there, but you feel comfortable. You don't feel awkward. Kel and Miss Janet, they're awesome ambassadors for barbecue and stuff like that. And they'll do whatever they can to help you and promote what they've said so many times. Hey, you need anything, let me know. You need anything, let me know. And they've been very helpful for me as far as my podcast, any information I needed. They're great ambassadors for barbecue. So that's why I told them that anytime you need me or anything, just let me know, because what y'all doing is great for barbecue, and people need to promote that as well as their magazine and stuff like that, because there's a lot of history that gets swept under the rug and it didn't get recorded. So all we know is the modern stuff and not the real history of barbecue. So it is awesome what they're doing. As far as the business aspect of it, did you have a hard time as far as getting the product out there as far as business wise, or did you kind of already familiar with how to do the business transactions of it as far as getting in the stores or online and stuff like that?
No, we've learned a lot of lessons the hard way. to be honest, we had no idea what we were going to do. We just knew what we wanted to do, which was begin to promote Arthur's legacy so that he didn't get lost to history. And we took our first delivery. You had asked earlier, did you work with a co-packer? Yeah. Once we got our recipe down to the point where it was Arthur's recipe again, we found a co-packer, taught the co-packer how to make it. It worked out great. We were satisfied. And then we ordered their minimum order. Well, their minimum order was still, I want to say it was like 300 gallons. That's a lot of barbecue sauce in, 20-ounce bottles. That's a lot of barbecue sauce. And so, we took delivery of it and immediately set out to selling it. We didn't have too hard a time immediately getting into enough stores to get rid of the majority of the sauce that we had. So it paid for itself, pretty quickly. And the biggest challenge is always being able to continue to expand. You get beyond the grocers that you might have a relationship with, and you got to start cold calling. You get beyond the butcher shops that you might have a relationship. You got to start cold calling on new butcher shops. And so the challenge is continuing to expand your network, and you begin to encroach into areas where other sauces are more popular. You're the little guy, you're the unknown, and helping them to appreciate, how their customers will respond to you versus the one shot sauce that might have to leave their shelf because of your appearance. They may not have the room just to slide you in. Somebody might have to go. And that's oftentimes a tough conversation if they've got an established relationship with another brand.
Yeah, definitely. And y'all have 2 sauces and 6 rubs, correct?
Correct.
Okay. If you want, you can run through the different sauces and rubs that you have. Just talk a little bit about each one if you can.
Sure. So our sauce, remember, it's early Kansas City style. So it's smoky, sweet, a little bit tangy, just very rich, robust, complex flavors. So you're tasting, the vegetables in there. You taste the onion, you taste the garlic, you taste, the celery that's in there. Yeah, we got a little celery in there. And a few other things that you'd never guess. But it's a very complex flavor. The spicy is same basic flavor. However, it's got a heat that sneaks up on you after you've had your first bite, but it lingers in the background. It never eclipses the flavor, and that's because of the one very unique pepper that we use and the balance between the 3 peppers that are present in the sauce itself. So it's a combination of the type of peppers and the balance. And I will tell you, that's what happens when one man has 100 years to tinker. They got time to, figure things like that out. So now when you think about like our dry rubs, our best seller for ribs and chicken is smokestack. And you think barbecue barbecue flavor, just as a point of reference, that's our smokestack. Again, it's smoky sweet with a little bit of heat. Then I would say that's our bestseller. Next bestseller is our Stockyard Steak. So Stockyard Steak is they talk about salt, pepper, garlic for beef. This is salt, pepper, garlic on steroids. It's heavy salt. It's salt, heavy garlic, heavy onion, but there are 9 other items in there beyond the salt, pepper, garlic. And so it too is a very complex, complementary flavor profile. Love it for brisket, love it for steak, and it's fantastic with blended into ground beef. We've got Righteous Poultry, which again it's that Kansas City smoky sweet barbecue flavor with poultry herbs in it. So the rosemary pops, a little bit of thyme pops in it. It's got a little bit less, doesn't really have any heat to it, but it does have a nice little like brown sugar finish. We've got our bootleg, which is an absolute treat. Bootleg, named that way because the high notes are bourbon, brown sugar, and coffee. And love it for a well-marbled steak. It's fantastic for beef. It's fantastic for pork. So like a ribeye, a thick cut pork chop, or a pork loin are my absolute favorites with it. Also like it on sweet potatoes, believe it or not. It's a really complementary flavor profile for sweet potatoes. Then Crossroads dry rub. Crossroads is a really complex seasoned salt. It's actually probably one of the most complicated recipes that we have in that there are 14 different items in it, 14 different seasonings in it. That come together. Let me think. It's savory. It's a little bit, you got to taste for a little bit of salt. It's a little I wouldn't call it salty, but you get that nice little, salt on your tongue, but it also has some cayenne to finish and it's wonderful for seafood. If you're doing like maybe grilling some salmon or some shrimp, this is going to be on there. I also like it for chicken on the grill as well, for days when you don't want it to be so sweet. And then the last one, it's the one that in our house, remember, we hand blend all of our dry rubs. I've got a blender that costs more than any car that I've ever purchased. Yeah, it's a Ross ribbon blender, and it will blend 200 pounds of dry rub in a matter of seconds. But we blend all of our own dry rub, and the one that we use the most at our house, it's actually Gold Dust dry rub. Gold Dust is the one that I have the hardest time describing. It's probably the simplest of our dry rubs in the number of ingredients, but it is savory and it's a flavor enhancer in terms of what it does to pork, to chicken, and to beef. And but the thing that we use it the most for is grilled, roasted, and sautéed vegetables. It hasn't met a vegetable that it doesn't like. In recent years, I've come to appreciate, knowing the recipe, I've come to appreciate that the thing that makes this such an incredible flavor enhancer is that the spices that are in it create almost an umami effect. Mm-hmm. And so, if you know anything about umami, you know that it's considered an additional sense associated with flavor with taste and the way that it makes you feel. So Gold Dust is a special one for us.
Okay. And are there any non-negotiables in the product that no matter how big the company grows, that is never going to change?
Good quality ingredients. We look at the way Arthur did things. He grew most of the vegetables that he used in his products. So where we go to the store and we buy onion powder, we buy garlic powder. He was growing onions, he was growing garlics, he was dehydrating them, grinding them, and literally making his own. You gotta appreciate that there's some good quality stuff there. While we're not doing that for most items, there are some things that have a very manual process. We smoke all of our own salts. We have a couple of processes like that. We just make sure that we're very specific with our co-packer about the brand of each ingredient that goes into our sauce. And then we hold ourselves accountable for the quality of the ingredients that we put into the rubs. So those are non-negotiables for us.
Okay. And what do you think customers respond more to, the flavor or your story first?
It depends on who it is. The story has stopping power. The flavor brings them back. I will tell you that. We had an event this weekend, bit of a public pop up, but the public could walk by. They didn't have to stop with us. And I've got to do something to get them to stop walking by, turn and talk to us. And I've got to find a hook, and it might be just stopping them, just asking, "Hey, are you a barbecue fan? Let me tell you the best story in barbecue," and then hitting them with a story, telling them about the award right away. Somebody says, "I'm sorry, I don't have time." You don't have time to learn about the best barbecue sauce in America? And they're like, "Yeah, right. I got the trophy at home that says so." And then you tell them the story why. And 9 times out of 10, they stand and they listen and they start asking questions.
Yeah, definitely. And the trophy mean a lot. I mean, some people, it gets people attention. So it's definitely big because you went against, hey, I went up against this many other sauces and came out first. So, it is what it is. Let's see. Okay. Let's talk about the history of barbecue. Do you think these days people focus more on the trends of barbecue than the history of barbecue and kind of sweep the history of barbecue under the rug?
I don't think it's being swept under the rug. I think it's just people are fixated on the here and now, period. I don't believe it's an intentional sweeping. I think it's just nothing compels them to look backwards. They're looking forward. And you just got to remind people that the here and now wouldn't be possible without, early Kansas City barbecue sauce, so you just see it as a continuum and appreciate the continuum itself.
Yeah, exactly. If Arthur was able to see what y'all doing now, what do you think he would think?
I think that he'd be proud. He was, by telling of family members, he knew he had created something special. The fanfare and the celebrity status that he enjoyed during his lifetime, he knew that he had done something really unique. And to see that it still has legs, and to see the reception that it gets in modern day versus all of the other commercially available sauces that are out there, see that it still holds its own and then some, I think that he would be proud of our collective accomplishment in keeping it at the forefront. One of the articles that I have, now remember, he lived in Kewanee, Illinois, which is arguably about 140 miles from Chicago. He lived there in an era of horse and wagon. People weren't driving cars and, whatnot. I have a newspaper article from 1919 in which a Chicago newspaper chronicled him hosting or being pitmaster for a barbecue that fed 30,000 people on Memorial Day weekend. 30,000 people in 1919. No refrigeration, no mechanical appliances like we know them. And the article itself entitles him King Barbecue. That newspaper is 140 miles away in an era of horse and wagon.
Wow. That's a lot of people.
Yeah. So anyway.
And that a quantity of people is, you have to be on point about everything. Wow. All right. And if
well organized with teams.
Exactly.
Teams of butchers, teams of folks turning the meat,
Yeah, it'll be a good assembly line. And if you had an hour to sit across from him, what would you say to him?
I would just listen. I wouldn't say much. I would just ask questions. If you can imagine someone that for the first 28 years of their life was worked like a farm animal, that if you look at our website, I have a photo of him. We're thinking it's about like 7 or 8 years post-slavery, very dapper, nice suit on. The man clearly was making his way forward in the world. He probably wasn't like really prosperous, but he was doing okay. But then you appreciate that he lived to be 108. Can you imagine all of the change that he saw? He saw every world war. He saw the advent of the automobile. No telling what else he saw that was remarkable to him. I would just like to sit and learn from him and appreciate how the world around him over the decades and the century impacted the way that he cooked and his bearing on life.
Yeah, definitely. And your family has connected the brand to children's literacy. Why is that so important?
Well, think about the fact that Arthur wasn't literate. He couldn't read, he couldn't write. That wasn't lost on him. He fought to make sure that his children did get an education here in Illinois. And as a result of his fight, his successful fight, and seeing how that transformed the future of our family in terms of opportunity and our footing here in the world, we have chosen to figure out how to use Old Arthur's to give back to the world in general in terms of children's literacy. So we created, when we first got started, even though we really weren't making much money, we created a charitable grant at our hometown public library. And we make sure that every year we give a portion of our earnings. A couple of years, it wasn't necessarily profit, but as a portion of our earnings. And then we host a couple of charity fundraisers to continue to add to that grant. And, we've grown it to the point where it's now the second largest grant in place at the Rock Island Public Library. We'll never catch the number one grant because it's basically the family behind John Deere. So there's a few more zeros on there in theirs than there is for ours. But ours is earmarked specifically for children's funds. And as a result of the more than decades long effort that we've had in putting those funds in place there at the library, as well as my dad's ongoing involvement, my grandmother's ongoing involvement, they actually named the Rock Island Library. They opened a second library and named it the Watts Family Library after our family.
That's excellent. You're doing good work. And when your chapter is finished, what do you hope they say Eudell Watts IV added to the story?
Actually, that's kind of simple. What I hope to accomplish is building a brand that is sustainable by future generations of our family, that allow these future generations, my kids, my nieces, nephews, their kids, when they start families, it allows them the opportunity to earn comfortable living by sharing Arthur's legacy. I work in corporate America. I've worked for basically a Fortune 50 company my entire adult life. And, it's that work has afforded folks in that family, quite a nice living. And I don't see any reason why at some stage this isn't, Old Arthur's isn't doing that for, my children and their children, to allow them to pursue things that give back to the community, but are of interest to them.
Exactly. And that's why I do this. Cause I mean, not only as far as just putting out the barbecue story, but show my two daughters. I have a 2-year-old and a 10-year-old. Hard work and the grind, that they see the behind the scenes stuff of me. Like I got to get up. I mean, at 3 a.m. and drive to work every day, but I still do these podcasts because it's important to me, and I want something that I can leave behind to them. And one, they can always hear my voice and hear what I did, as well as if they want to take over or do anything like that, they're welcome to do that. As far as just not just putting this out, I want this to go further than just putting this on the radio every week. Just be picked up just do something that other people haven't done. Maybe like be the first barbecue person to be signed to Netflix or ESPN to come on and host a podcast on barbecue or anything like that. I'm trying to think of big picture and not just as a hobby and stuff like that, so I can have a legacy for them. And while letting them know that, hey, you can do what you want to do and not have to work for the corporate world like I do now. You can do your own thing and be successful as long as you work hard and put your all into it. So I definitely understand that.
Exactly.
All right. And that's all the questions I have. I'm going to play a quick game with you and get you out of here. I call this the BBQ Therapy Smoke Showdown. Came up with a tournament bracket like in college basketball with 16 meats that you cook on the grill. I'm going to give you each matchup. Just tell me which one you prefer to eat, and we'll see which one's the winner. All right, first matchup is brisket versus hot dog.
Brisket.
All right, smoked chicken versus pork chop.
Pork chop.
Okay. Pork ribs versus lamb.
Lamb.
Wow. Steak versus
I love belly. Lamb. Pork belly.
Okay. And beef ribs versus barbecue shrimp.
Beef ribs.
Okay. Hamburger versus smoked bologna.
Ooh, that's a tough one. I'm going to go hamburger. I got to stay traditional.
All right. Sausage versus smoked ham.
What kind of sausage?
It could be any sausage.
I'm going to go smoked ham.
All right. Smoked turkey versus burnt ends.
Burnt ends.
Okay. Next round, brisket versus pork chop.
Brisket.
Okay. Lamb versus pork belly.
Lamb.
Okay. Beef ribs versus hamburger.
Beef ribs.
Okay. Ham versus burnt ends.
Burnt ends.
Okay. All right. Final four, brisket versus lamb.
Good brisket beats lamb.
All right. And beef ribs versus burnt ends.
Beef rib.
All right. You got the brisket versus the beef rib.
Yeah, I'm going to stick with brisket.
All right. Brisket is the winner. All right. Eudell Watts IV, your therapy session is over. And if you want to promote anything, you can definitely do it at this time.
I would just ask people to check out our history on www.oldarthurs.com. You'll get plenty of photos. You'll get the full story and appreciation of who Arthur was and what he has to offer you in your backyard.
Yeah, definitely. And it's an amazing story. And I appreciate you coming on and sharing your story because it's different, because a lot of people are not able to trace their ancestry back that far and able to share the story and continue to pass the story down. So I definitely appreciate you coming on and sharing your story and your wonderful product and stuff like that. So definitely check it out, everybody. All right. But on that note, we'll see everybody next episode. Thank you for joining us for another therapy session. And remember, like, follow, and subscribe to help the barbecue therapy community. And also visit our website at www.bbqtherapypodcast.com.